Well, we began this course, or the history part of the course, looking at the Middle Ages. We saw how music has developed. We started where music had really not even been invented as far as the way, the scales that we have, the way we write into music, the forms of music that we have. And we saw through this course how all of that was basically developed. We've watched it grow. We've watched it grow into the Baroque period where tonality was established with major and minor keys. And then on into the Classic period where those forms were developed very clear and very precise. And then along came Beethoven to stir everything up and expand the harmonies. And then we saw in the 19th century, the Romantic period, we saw things really grow based on much of what Beethoven did, and the orchestras got so large, and tonality began to expand even farther. Now, as we come to the 20th century, in some ways we've come almost full circle. We come to a time when composers are looking for more ways to experiment with their music, and tonality has stretched so far. In the early 20th century, new scales are developed: the pentatonic scale, the octatonic scale, the whole tone scale, and even some composers even challenging the whole idea of tonality and whether it was necessary or not. And all of the forms of music just changed so radically. And in some ways, it was. Some ways it was accepted, but in many ways it simply was not accepted. Even composers like, you'll study Arnold Schoenberg and his development of serial music, or also called 12-tone music. Music began to get in some ways very elitist, very different from the music of the Classic period and the Romantic period, written very much for the people. It began to create its own little world, you might say. Oddly enough, though, or maybe not surprising, composers were either in the very avant-garde group or specifically out of it. You did find a development of new types of instruments. You did find some composers, especially mid-20th century, pulling back away from the excesses of the early 20th century. There was a whole new genre of music developed, and it was music for movies. As the movie industry developed, you found composers. Originally, classic music was put behind, sort of in the background of movies. But then, as movies developed, this whole genre of movie music became a whole new avenue of expression for the composers. Probably the greatest movie composer to this point has been John Williams. He's made the music for over 100 movies. Everything from Jaws to the Star Wars trilogies, the Indiana Jones movies. He has developed a tremendous repertoire of music for the movie industry. As you study this period, listen again to all of the music. Listen with an open ear. Listen to Impressionist composers like Claude Debussy. Go ahead and listen to the avant-garde composer of serial music, Arnold Schoenberg. Charles Ives, he had music that was sometimes bitonal. In other words, music and part of the orchestra would be playing in one key and part of the orchestra would be playing in another key at the same time. But then listen also to music by great American composers like Aaron Copland and Leonard Bernstein. You will also come across one very interesting composer named George Gershwin. George Gershwin was primarily a jazz musician, but he learned how to, he introduced jazz to the classical community. You'll enjoy listening to Rhapsody in Blue as one of his wonderful pieces. Then in our last chapter, we'll study about jazz music and how it is essentially a new element of 20th century, but it's so different that it is given its whole own chapter. So we'll save that for our next video. But look over the music of the 20th century, see how much it's changed from the 19th and 18th century. And in some ways, especially by the investigation of new tonalities, how we've almost come full circle from modes to tonalities to new tonalities to atonality and back again. So enjoy this study of the 20th century music, and we'll see you in the next chapter on jazz.